Good morning, I'm Jessica Lovell, and welcome to the Morning Medical Update. We have heard many doctors say that the worst part of their job is telling a patient that there is no treatment for their disease. Today, we're meeting someone who was on the receiving end of that conversation. Robin Love learned that even after a mastectomy, an aggressive form of breast cancer could come back. And at that time, there was no FDA-approved treatment for her. But she is alive today, thanks in large part to a clinical trial and her push for a second opinion. And we are glad to have Robin here with us this morning. 18 years cancer-free, I understand?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Well, yeah, it's great to see you. And we're so glad to reunite Robin with two members of her care team. Right next to me is the one and only Dr. Carol Fabian. And to say she's kind of a big deal is a little bit of an understatement, so we'll talk more about why that is. But she is a breast oncologist at the University of Kansas Cancer Center, where she is also the director of the Breast Cancer Prevention and Survivorship Research Center. She is often called a pioneer. She has earned national recognition for her research. So to put it simply, Dr. Fabian's work over the years has helped make breast cancer more survivable. But of course, she cannot do it alone. Breast oncology nurse practitioner Lori Rinaldo is part of the team helping so many women just like Robin. So good to have you as well. Robin, how is it to all be reunited here together?
It's amazing. And you know, sometimes it feels like it's been 18 years and sometimes it feels like just yesterday. You know, when I'm here with
Dr. Fabian, is it nice? How nice is it to have be reunited with
fantastic.
patients?
I love it.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see how you're thriving.
Yes.
And that you've seen all those milestones for your family. It's amazing.
Thanks to you both. Yes.
Yeah. So take us back then, Robin. You're 39 years old. You feel a lump. We've heard that story before.
Yes.
How did you find it? What was that moment like?
I was putting my pajamas on one night and found, you know, like a marble-sized lump, and you know, it took me to my knees, scared to death. I knew no one that had cancer that young, and I thought the worst. You know. It was a very scary time in my life.
Yep, we go to the worst immediately.
Yes.
And we should acknowledge you had care that started at another hospital, but once you got into your care routine, you found that there were more than one tumor. Is that correct?
After my mastectomy, they found a more invasive tumor than what I had had. And when I went in to see the oncologist, the treatment that I needed, I couldn't get. I wasn't a candidate.
So what was the diagnosis?
I had, I think, 3 different areas of cancer, one which was, or maybe 2, that were estrogen fed and HER2 positive.
So Dr. Fabian, we know breast cancer has many different types. It has subtypes. What is HER2? We hear HER2 positive, but what is HER2 new positive?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
It's positive. Breast cancer is actually many different diseases. It all just happens to start in one organ, the breast. So about 70 to 80% of breast cancers are what Robin called estrogen fed. They're estrogen receptor positive, plus or minus progesterone receptor positive. That also means that they usually respond very nicely to anti-hormonal treatments. About 20 to 30% of tumors have growth factors on their surface, and one of those growth factors is HER2.
So rank this as far as aggressiveness.
It is one of the most aggressive types of cancer. Aggressive cancers tend to occur most often at the extremes of life. So young women are those that are most likely to get HER2 positive cancer, as well as another aggressive type of cancer called triple negative cancer. We knew back in the 80s, for example, that young women who developed breast cancer had a much worse prognosis, even if they had a very small amount of tumor, but we really didn't know what exactly to do about it, besides after surgery to give them chemotherapy, and if their tumors were quote-unquote hormone-fed or estrogen receptor positive, to give them anti-hormone therapy.
So, Robin, you hear breast cancer, and it's something I've learned on this program is, you know, back in the day, you mentioned the 80s, we just, breast cancer is breast cancer. Were you surprised to learn this kind of subtype and what you were learning as you went along and did your research?
Right. You know, as when I first was diagnosed, I knew nothing about breast cancer. And so, you know, Googling is good and bad, but I did, realized that through research that there was a particular drug, Herceptin, that I needed because it helped with survival rates. And
so you do that research and you find that drug, but technically it was not approved for you particularly.
Right. When I went to a different hospital system, they said, you can't have that. That's not an option for you. And I'm in pharmaceutical sales, and one of my KU doctors that I called on is like, you need a second opinion. You need to go see Dr. Carol Fabian at KU. And that's exactly what I did, and here I am today to talk about it.
Right next to her. So what were they telling you about why you would not be approved for that particular drug?
I was just not a candidate because it wasn't metastatic breast cancer from my understanding, and it was, the staging wasn't.
Absolutely correct. The way that breast cancer drugs are developed, or really almost any cancer drug, is we start out with what's called phase 1 trials, looking at side effects. And that started for Herceptin in 1992, the earliest type of trial, after they discovered this growth factor on some people's cells and developed an antibody against it. Then by the mid-90s, it was in trials for metastatic disease. And I will never forget at ASCO hearing the first results of the trials in HER2-positive metastatic disease. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, women have been surviving a very short period of time, often dying of brain metastasis. With this drug, the recurrence rate at a short follow-up time was dramatically reduced, and survival was dramatically impacted. So we knew, because of these results, that there was eventually going to be trials for someone like Robin. Mm-hmm. But it takes time. You have to get the FDA approval, and the trials have to be implemented. So you couldn't just go out and give drug to people who were not on a clinical trial. In the mid-2000s, it wasn't approved by the FDA, and that's what the oncologist that she saw was telling her. So basically, you had to go to some place that had a clinical trial for people who'd had their tumor removed but were at risk of relapse. And we did have a clinical trial here.
That you had one here. Okay,
yes.
So that allowed her to get that
Mm-hmm.
medication.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we talk about the importance of clinical trials, but also the importance of second opinions. How important was that in this case?
Well, for her, it was very
Everything.
important.
Yes.
Again, we didn't know all the ins and outs about HER2-positive disease in 2006 when she was diagnosed. But we did know even a very small HER2-positive tumor, and especially one that was both HER2-positive and estrogen receptor positive, was a very aggressive tumor that was likely to relapse.
So how does Herceptin work? How often is treatment?
The treatment is usually with Herceptin is by an injection, and it's given every few weeks. The treatment interval kind of depends on the clinical trial. It really doesn't have much in the way of side effects that people experience, but it has a very significant late-term side effect. These HER2 receptors that the antibody coats and prevents the signaling are also on your heart muscle. Mm. So over time, especially if you've been exposed to other drugs that can cause heart damage, which she was, you can get long-lasting heart effects and have premature congestive heart failure. So again, we did not know all the ins and outs of this at the time treatment was started. So we had to watch for it very carefully, and that's why we thought a lot about giving Herceptin to people who also had drugs that could cause heart damage. And at the time, one of the standard drugs to give people was anthracyclines, drugs like adriamycin and epirubicin. So that was a standard drug to give people after surgery.
One of the nice things about the Cancer Center here is this team approach. As we said, you can't do it alone. Lori, you are a big part of this team. Explain your role as a nurse practitioner. Don't be shy. Tell us why you are so important to patients.
Well, thank you. I think it's just a compliment to the physician. Oftentimes the physician has the hardest part of going in and telling the patient they have a cancer, it's aggressive, but they're trying to save people's lives, so they have to move on to the next patient. And oftentimes it's the nurse or the nurse practitioner that spends the time with the patient to really go through what side effects, to kind of calm those fears, that we're going to do everything we can so that you can watch your kids graduate from high school, and you know, we're going to be there every step of the way. If you have side effects, we're going to address it. If you have nausea, we're going to address it. If we have problems with your heart, we will address it. And I think just knowing that you have somebody on the team in your corner,
like a
that
friend,
you can reach out to,
like a family member, a friend,
confidant,
right there.
Yeah. I mean, our patients become our family.
And you're having to walk them through
Absolutely.
a life and death situation. And
it's such a privilege.
Privilege.
Yes.
That's a wonderful way of looking at it. Robin, did Lori cover it? Did she cover about what she meant to you and how important she was to you?
Yes, and just, you know, being young and naive and so scared, you have so many questions, and I would come in and Lori would just, you know, ease my mind. I'd come in with crazy worrying, and she would just help me through that process, and it was a lifesaver for me.
You told us that you were going through treatment. You prayed that you were going to survive to one very important milestone. What was it?
To have my kids graduate high school. They were 7 and 9, and you know, when I was diagnosed, I didn't really worry about myself. I worried about my kids not having a mom at that time.
And they're how old now?
My son Nicholas is 28, and my daughter Natalie is 25.
All right, so you blew past that milestone.
Yes,
we like that.
I blew past.
They're no longer kids, as you mentioned. Just tell us about them and just how they're doing and what's going on with you guys.
They're doing amazing. Nicholas,
your twin here, your daughter looks like your twin.
Oh, I hear that a lot. My son's 28. He's married to a wonderful woman named Kelsey, and they have a baby named Blakely, and they're both thriving. And my daughter is my sunshine in my life, and she is actually getting married this February. So a lot of exciting things going on that I would have missed out on. Very excited.
At the time of that diagnosis, did you ever think that you'd be called grandma? At the time, you were just thinking, try to get your kids out of high school, and now you're grandma?
Yes, I am.
That's a pretty good title to get to.
Very exciting.
And your diagnosis, this has been kind of a full circle moment for the family, because your diagnosis actually inspired your son's career choice.
Yes, it did.
Tell us.
Well, I was going through my cancer. He, you know, realized that I was getting help, and somebody was saving my life, and he became very passionate about becoming a physician. And he went through med school. He's an MD, and he actually invented a medical device and owns his own company, and so he's helping many patients now. So it's really full circle for him.
Well, and also Dr. Fabian didn't know this, but she was his mentor and inspiration, and she didn't even realize it. And then they met. Tell us that story.
Yes. So my son, during undergrad, he was getting ready to share his research information at a KU Med symposium, and Dr. Fabian happened to be speaking at that symposium, and after she spoke, he came up to her and just thanked her for saving his mom's life. You know, so for him, like you said, she was a mentor that he had never met until that day.
What's that like to hear, Dr. Fabian?
It's incredible. It usually brings tears to your eyes, quite frankly.
That's okay. We can cry around here a little bit. It's okay. That's what this is all about.
What we were talking about is that the injectable device that he invented is one that we use for all kinds of drugs now that patients can give themselves. So they don't have to go into an expensive treatment center to get an injection. So it's used for cholesterol meds, it's used for diabetes meds, it's even used for the new weight loss drug meds. So he is saving all kinds of lives with that.
Good work to your son. What's his name?
Nicholas.
Nicholas, okay.
Yes. Dr. Nicholas Love, I need to say.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholas Love. Let's give him proper due. I'd like to say, you know, I'm safely assuming survivorship now is I guess, everything you had prayed for.
Absolutely.
Tell us about it more.
You know, I don't think about me being a survivor every day. You know, before it was I thought about breast cancer every day, but you know, that diagnosis really taught me about what's important in life, and so I live every day to the fullest, and it made me realize that I'm strong and I can fight through anything.
Do you do checkups? What's the follow-up
Every
like?
year.
Every year?
We do
Just and checkups regarding cancer, or are you back to checking and just checking and making
Just
sure
checking.
everything is tip top?
Absolutely.
I love that. You look great. So if you're watching and you want to see what clinical trials are out there, we've actually created an app. Search for KUCC Clinical Trial Finder. It lets you search by cancer type or keyword, and if you find one that interests you, you can fill out the interest form. That will then get sent to the research team, and again, that app is called KUCC Clinical Trial Finder. So be sure to ask your questions, use the chat on YouTube or Facebook. We are on the X platform, or you can email us at the Medical News Network. Information is right there on your screen. Let's get a quick check on our COVID count. It's Friday. Dr. Dana Hawkinson is joining us this morning. Hi, good morning.
Hi. We have 12 active COVID patients in the hospital right now. So again, number bumped up a little bit, but hopefully overall we can start to see more of a downtrend, more like the last week when we had single digits with 8 active inpatients.
But you might ask Lori about survivorship.
Doc Hawk, a new study looked at the COVID vaccine and the possible link to deadly heart problems, and it's a link that gets a lot of attention from vaccine skeptics, but the findings of this study pretty much were debunking that statement. Tell us how so.
Yeah, you know, I think we need to continue to be transparent and promote vaccines. We know that they save lives. They save illness. We know that there is a large misinformation campaign and anti-vaccination campaign. So I think this is one more piece of evidence showing that the vaccines are safe, particularly in a certain group. We know that there was an increased amount of myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart, particularly in adolescent males after getting the COVID vaccine. So what this study does was looking at some of that information, and they were looking at also what was, more importantly, was there deaths linked to the COVID vaccine. And what this study did, it was out of Oregon. It looked at young people aged 16 to 30. This was the time period when the vaccines were still kind of new, so June of 2021 to December of 2022. And during that time, in that age group of 16 to 30, they saw almost 1,300 deaths. A majority of them were male. And then what they did was particularly go down and look at those deaths. They did find that there were 30 total deaths of those young people attributed to COVID-19 itself, so the actual disease. But during that time period, they were also looking at, were some of these people vaccinated? And when they looked at vaccination records, what they found was that there really wasn't any of those deaths attributed to vaccination itself. So really what we're seeing here is that it continues to be true that the disease is much worse than the vaccine. And also what they found was that of those young people that died, only 2 of them had actually been vaccinated. So certainly we believe probably if there were more of those people that were vaccinated, could have saved their lives as well. So again, this is just kind of one more piece showing that the vaccines are safe. Not only these vaccines, but we saw on Wednesday with Dr. Steitz's show how there is a continued or increased concern of safety about COVID vaccines in particularly among pregnant women. But this is one more piece of data showing that these COVID vaccines are actually safe.
All right, Hawk, great. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here in studio on Monday, okay?
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's get to some questions from our viewers this morning. Quick comment, great comment from Judy. She said she was in one of Dr. Fabian's trials. She said she's a loving, kind, and brilliant, top of her brilliance. She said she knows somebody who's also in the clinic. She said she can't say how grateful she is for Dr. Fabian and the whole staff. Such a blessing. Had to share that. Have to share that with you. Question for Lori. How does someone find the survivorship clinic? Tell us about that and how do you get in?
Right. So most of the referrals to our survivorship clinic come directly from our oncologist, our medical oncologist, or our surgeons, our radiation physicians. But we also accept referrals from outside physicians. So if a patient wants to self-refer to the survivorship clinic, they can by calling our nurse navigation line.
Another question, does the stage of cancer matter with HER2 positive?
Absolutely.
Always, right?
Always. Women who are diagnosed with later stage, for example, node positive or tumors that are greater than about 1.5 inches, will get more treatment. These people oftentimes start out with chemotherapy plus or minus anti-HER2 therapy even before they get their definitive surgery. Then they get their surgery, and then they get more Herceptin or drugs like Herceptin. On the other hand, people with small tumors, clinically node negative, oftentimes it'll be just like Robin. They'll get their tumor removed first, and then they will get some treatment afterwards. If their tumors are diagnosed when they're very small, they may just get even a single drug that's not very toxic, doesn't even make you necessarily lose your hair, and get a few months of Herceptin. On the other hand, if the tumor is diagnosed late, more chemotherapy, longer anti-HER2 treatment.
Jeremy wants to know, and he just saw how we put the app as a way to find out about clinical trials and get your application in and ask those questions, but is it something that doctors should be proactive talking to patients about? Or someone, in Robin's case where she did the research and asked about it, how should those conversations go?
Both.
Gotcha.
I will guarantee you that doctors can't know everything about every clinical trial or what all clinical trials are available. I will say that most physicians at KU are at least very knowledgeable of the important clinical trials in their subspecialty area. Patients can go on to clinicaltrials.gov. There's or the KU app. There's a variety of ways not only to find out what trials are going on at a particular institution, but across the U.S. And we also have to remember that not every patient is a good candidate for clinical trials. For example, patients that have a lot of underlying organ diseases or that have other problems may not be good candidates for a clinical trial.
Who initiates the clinical trials? Is it always the drug company?
A lot of times it is, as far as cancer treatment trials, because they're the ones that have spent $1 billion getting the drug discovered and getting it to market. But for many other types of trials, for example, survivorship trials, where we're asking questions about quality of life or weight loss or hormones, or very importantly, in Robin's case, how's the heart getting along? Those are often initiated by investigators in the field. We call those investigator-initiated trials. They're initiated by physicians. I'm very heavily invested in prevention trials. I got very interested in breast cancer prevention from treating people like Robin, people that develop cancer at a young age. So Lori and I asked, well, what can we do to assess who's at highest risk for breast cancer, and then maybe do something to intervene.
This is for Lori and Dr. Fabian. Lori, you first. How has breast cancer and the treatment of patients changed since you entered into the field?
Well, I celebrated 31 years at KU. When we first started treating patients here, we had a very small little place over in where it's now the Spine Center. There was about 7 oncologists. We had a handful of drugs. Like if someone had breast cancer, we knew they were probably going to get some chemotherapy. They probably would get tamoxifen. We just didn't know a whole lot. It has drastically changed. There are so many drugs that if a patient comes in with a breast cancer diagnosis now, we can tell them, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, the conversations have completely changed.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Well, we'll have to do an entire show on this.
Well,
Dr.
I'm
Fabian?
even older than Lori. So I started my fellowship to be an oncologist in 1975. So it's been almost 50 years. And when I was in my fellowship, the concept of prophylactic or adjuvant therapy was just starting. Half the time we had to put patients in the hospital because the drugs we gave them made them vomit. We didn't have the good antiemetics, and we certainly didn't have all the drugs. You would die laughing if you could see a mammogram from back in 1980. It was just like a whiteout. So there wasn't very good early detection, and most, especially young women, found their cancers by feeling it themselves. So the bottom line is the stage of disease at diagnosis has gone down, down, down. The survival rate has gone up, up, up. And people's treatment, importantly, is now tailored not only to the stage, but to the type of breast cancer they have. That's called precision medicine.
Any theories from earlier in your career that are now being confirmed by new research that you can think of? Anything that, going back to 1975 to current days, that you're saying, we thought that, and here it is?
Oh boy.
I knew that all along.
Oh, love it.
I think the biggest thing that we felt in 1975 that yes, giving therapy prophylactically after somebody had been diagnosed with breast cancer was probably going to result in the cure of a lot of people. And I think that's been borne out. Unfortunately, it doesn't cure everybody, but the combination of these new medicines that we have and earlier stage disease has just made a tremendous, it's just unbelievable to look at the difference. And now what we're trying to do is kind of breach that last barrier and try to prevent people that have precancerous cells in their body from getting breast cancer to begin with.
You talked about 50 years, but where would you, I can't let you go without asking, where would you, if you had a wish list, maybe one thing at the top of your wish list that in 50 years from now you hope we'd be at, where would it be?
I really hope that we can develop non-toxic ways to really prevent obesity, prevent breast cancer, that almost no one would actually develop breast cancer and actually have to get chemotherapy for breast cancer. I guess that would be my wish list.
That's a good one. Let's get our takeaways today. Lori, what would be the big takeaway for folks listening today?
Prevention. Knowing what your family history looks like, knowing what your body feels like, getting the appropriate screenings at the appropriate time, and being your own advocate. If you feel something and someone tells you it's probably nothing, don't stop.
See something, feel something, say something?
Yes, yes.
Dr. Fabian, what's the big takeaway?
I totally agree with that. And I think for your audience at home, what you can do at home to help prevent breast cancer is, number one, exercise, 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 at least 3 to 5 hours a week. It can be something as simple as fast walking. Watch your weight, watch your diet. All those 5 servings a day of fruits and vegetables is very good advice. Make sure you're getting an adequate amount of vitamin D. And I know you don't want to hear this, but try to have your first baby as early as possible. You know, those are things that everybody can do to help prevent breast cancer. And then the other very important thing is, even for average risk women, try to get that first mammogram as close to 40 as possible. Know if you're at increased risk, if you have a family history. If you do have a family history, think about getting genetic testing and thinking about getting what we call augmented screening.
Okay, now I have a question for myself. I have my kids at 39 and 41. That's a higher risk. Higher risk?
It is a higher risk.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So, you know, Mother Nature really meant us not to start having periods until we were 15 or 16 and have that baby a year or two later. And what that did is it fully developed the breast tissue and gave it protection from developing cancer. Well, now we start menstruating at 12, and a lot of us don't have babies until we're in our late 30s or early 40s. And that is a long time for all the insults in the environment and hormones to act on, you know, kind of immature breast tissue. So the statistics are I don't want you to panic.
I won't, but
That women who have their first baby after the age 30 or who never have children have approximately twice the risk as women who had their first child under the age of 20.
how old were you when you had your first?
I believe I was 29.
Okay, so 10 years later. Okay, all right, that's good to know. Thank you for that tip. Appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story today.
Yes,
What's the big takeaway from it?
I think, just be an advocate for yourself. A clinical study, KU Medical Center just happened to have a clinical trial on a drug that I needed at that time to save my life. So I'm truly blessed, and always look into what you think you can do for yourself as far as, talking to your physician and educating yourself.
You look great. You're doing life well.
Thank you so
Thank you for
much.
being with us. Thanks to all of our guests, and thanks to our viewers, as always, for being with us. We'll see you back here on Monday. Coming up Monday on the Morning Medical Update, removing part of his tongue and then rebuilding a new one. I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Morning Medical Update. The warning signs that helped this firefighter catch oral cancer early, plus the techniques that help him speak again. Monday at 8.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.